I'm so excited about this new series called Freedom, Purpose, and Influence. So someone say that, freedom, purpose, and influence. And so all month long, we're going to be discussing God's plan for your new life. Because the thing about God is that He has a plan. And He has a plan for you now and for your future. I remember a number of years ago, I had the privilege of traveling with my mother. And for those of you who do not know, my mom goes to Europe a lot, and she'll go on these tours. And so she'll go and she'll preach over a 6-week period. She'll do like 10, 12, 13 churches. And it's a really cool thing. And we've actually brought in teams in the past. And that's something that I think we'll do again as a church. And it's great because some of these churches are big and some of them are small. And these churches represent the makeup of Sweden. Because if you've ever been to Sweden before, Sweden is about the size of California, but it's the population of Los Angeles. And so there's a lot of driving that happens if you ever visit Sweden, because everything's spread out because it's such a big country. And I remember this one time we were going to go to this one church, and we had been on the road for a few weeks. And you know, when you become like a roadie and you're always sleeping in like a different location, you develop habits that kind of get you through the traveling. Has anyone ever done that? You have habits. It's like, for me, whenever I go to Disney, I need to get a corn dog on Main Street. I just have to do it. Like, if I do one thing at Disney, it's that. And I'll be okay. If I don't, I'm cranky. Come on, somebody. Because everybody needs certain things that we love to do. And so we were going to this city we had never been before, and going to this church we had never been before. And so like usual, I start texting my mom Yelp reviews of places that we should go while we're in the town, because I'm like a poor man's Anthony Bourdain, if you ever travel with me, is that I'm one of those people that Yelp everything. I kind of wish that every restaurant was like one of those old school Chinese restaurants where they just had photos of all the food. And so I began to send her pictures of things that we should do while we were there. And I remember we were in the car, and they were taking us to our hotel. And so I said, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? Like so many nights before, because usually they don't curate dinner for you. And I remember that the pastor turned around and he said, no, we already got plans for you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that doesn't happen a lot. And he said, so you're going to be here for 4 days. So we actually have plans for you every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that was like real odd, because that never happens. And I was like, okay. And me being the cynical person that I generally am, I was skeptical about these plans. And so I said, so what restaurants are we going to? Like, I'm rank ordering this pastor's food tastes. And he said, no. We have plans that you're going to be hosted by a different family for dinner every night. And so if you're a pastor, you know that's a bit of a gamble. That could go real well. The glory could fall. Relationships could be forged that will change your life, or it's super awkward and you're with people who speak a different language with different interests, and you're there for 4.5 hours. And so I was skeptical, I'll be honest with you. My Orange County side started to kick in. Like, who are these people? Right? What time is it? Ooh, yeah, maybe we just do 2 hours. Who've ever done that before? Like, you start putting your exit plan in the conversation before you even get there. I'm a big fan of that. If you ever have lunch with me, I will always say, yeah, I got till 4:30, and then I got this thing. And so I remember that they had all these plans, and it was fully curated. And I'll never forget, out of all the churches I've ever been to, big or small, and I've been to some really amazing churches because of my family, I would say that this church is probably my favorite church I've ever been to. And it was a small church in a small town with about 60 people in this like A-frame cabin type older church built in 1910, 1915. But the people were amazing, and I have to say that after we went through those plans, I left so charged up, so on fire. I thought we were going to go to bless them, but they ended up blessing us. And it was so cool because it was like a church where every person in that church was a powerful leader. It was wild. Like, I had never seen that. Like, pound for pound, probably the most powerful church I've ever been to. Because they have 100 people who are members, and all 100 were packing spiritual power. It was like, I'm a doctor, I lead the ushers, and I got a prayer ministry on the side. Like, it was that level. Every person that you had met. I have 2 master's degrees. I'm an engineer. I'm helping in kids. Every person we talked to was smart, capable, put together, educated, powerful, generous, and serving. It was the most amazing thing. And so it had such a big impact on me, and I just loved that they had plans for us. And I think that it's like that with God. I think that when we say yes to Jesus, often what we do is we come in with our own plans. I just recently moved, and so I remember when we were packing everything up, me and my wife, we packed everything up. You know, there's certain things that in the move you think are going to go certain places, and then you move, and then we had my mom's been helping us, and if you do not know my mom, she's an interior designer, and so I'll put something somewhere, and then she'll move it, and it will look way better. And so one of the things that I learned through the moving experience is that my plans weren't very good when it came to design. And so a designer's plans are better than a non-designer's plans. And so that's often like it is with God, is that we have our own plans about who we are and what our lives are going to be. But I have news for you. A lot of those plans might not be the best plan. They might not even be very good plans. Well, why? Because the plans that we have are based off of what we know. That's why. So with little old me trying to figure out where to put this greenery in the house, I've only bought 2 or 3 plants in my life. So even though I might be a better planter, placer person than the average bear, I'm not a designer. And so one of the things that was cool with my mom helping us was that every move she would make, it made me realize, hey, I didn't even think about that. And so, well, why is that case? And now I've committed now. I'll never move without a designer. I'm just telling you, don't move and think that you can do it all. Have somebody who's good at it give you some advice, because you're going to need it, because you ain't that good at putting things in places. And so, well, why? Because I only know so much. And so when you come to Jesus, you only know so much. You got your family, that neighborhood you grew up in, that school you went to, those 6 books you read, even though you have told people you read 45. We all have plans, but those plans are often just based off of what we know. And they might even be pretty okay plans. But the thing about God is when we say that God has a plan for you, what we're saying is that we're saying that God is working from a larger deck of knowledge. He sees things in you that you haven't discovered yet. He knows people that you have not met. He knows what's in you before you get to that place where you're even stretched. And so you could be in a place in your life where you're insecure about taking on a new responsibility, or maybe a relationship, or making a move, or getting pushed in a certain way. And so you're insecure. Well, that's natural to be insecure, because by definition, why would you be secure if you're doing something you've never done before? And so it's natural to feel insecure when you're doing something you've never done. But God already knows what you're capable of, because He created you. And so when we say that God's got a plan for your life, that he has a journey for you after he said yes, he's not just going to save you and leave you. That he redeemed you for a purpose. He has planned for you. He has work he's prepared for you to do. God is working from a bigger deck than you. And so that's why it's so important that when you come to the Lord, as Christians, we talk about submitting. Well, what does that mean? It's saying, God, I'm working with this deck. And I know you're working with this deck. And so I don't want to live my planned out life. My Uncle Tim, who's watching right now, has this message. I don't just want to have a good idea. I want to live my God idea. What do you see for me? What journey do you want to take? You just saved my life, God. You just rescued me. So what are you seeing? Because you clearly thought I was worth it to rescue. And so I don't know all the pieces of me quite yet. And so what is your plan for me? And so all month long, we're going to be talking about what God is planning for you. Because he has a plan. And so this is point number 1 for those of you note takers. Jeremiah 29:11. God has a plan. And I love this. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. I think this is so powerful because I think so often people come to God without knowing what God is planning. I was listening to an interview with Robert De Niro, and some interview asked him years ago if he believed in God, and he said, well, if God exists and I get to heaven, I have a lot of questions for him. And so I feel like many people who aren't Christians, they feel that way, is that they might believe in a God, but they don't know why. What is God planning? What is God up to? What is God's nature? Why does he do what he does? And I love Jeremiah because as Christians, we don't have to live wondering and wandering. We can live knowing, having security. And so that's what Jeremiah says, is God says, I know the plans I have for you. They are plans to give you hope. They are plans to prosper you, not to harm you. They are plans to give you a future. Amen? And so point 2, and so I want to take us on this journey this month. And so the first thing that God is planning for you, he's planning for you 3 things that we're going to unpack. The first is that he's planning freedom. He wants to give you a life of freedom. He has purpose for your life, and he's setting you up for influence. And so that's the journey that we say yes to as people of faith. And so Jesus is the door, that's freedom. The first thing that God gives you when you come to him is he frees you up. But he frees you for a purpose, then he gives you purpose. And then once you say yes to that purpose, you grow in influence. And so that's the journey. It does not matter if you were Paul in the Bible. It does not matter if you were any pastor you've ever met or any Christian leader you've ever met. It's the same. It's free. The journey of faith is freedom. Someone say freedom. Purpose and influence. In that order. And so today I want to talk about freedom. So this is point number 2. Is Jesus has come to give you freedom. And so this is interesting. I want to unpack this a little bit because we are Americans and we live in the land of the free, right? Home of the brave. I like baseball games. But the thing about Americans is that we have a very unique definition of freedom. And so before I became a pastor, I spent too many years in seminary and studied a lot of philosophy. And so one of the things that I paid particular attention to was how Americans and how people in the West think about freedom. And so often when we say free, what we really mean is choice. Freedom in the West is freedom to choose. So almost always when we're talking about freedom, what we're talking about is freedom to have choice. And so let's break that down. I was obviously we just moved, and one of the things that I had to do unsuccessfully was go to Target, as some of you call it, the regulars. And you can always tell the regulars. Have you ever noticed? Like when I go to Target, I go to one aisle to get one item to leave. And usually in the process of me leaving, I will see a Target person who is making their way through the aisles. You can always tell. There's Target people, and then there's Target people. As everybody knows, I'm not trying to call anybody out, but there are some Target people in this room. I'm pretty sure you just go to hang out there. It's like 1 p.m. My wife's a Target person. I got to put her on blast. It'll be like 1, and she'll go, I'm going to go to Target. And then 7 o'clock will roll by. And I'm like, how many things did you get? Oh, just this. Just this? You were there for 7 hours. What happened? I talked to this person about God. It was amazing. Anyway. But we often mean choice. And so when I was at Target the other day, I was trying to choose soap, which if you've ever done is a terrible thing to do. Did you know they have an aisle of soap? And it's long. Like it's a really long aisle. There's like 100 different types of soap. I was not mentally, emotionally, or spiritually prepared for the journey I had to take. Like all I wanted was regular soap. Like give me soap that probably is natural because I have sensitive skin. I don't want it to smell fruity, so maybe is there like almost like plain yogurt? Is there like a plain soap? It can be gray. I'm a dude. Like I don't need anything fancy. But there were 100 bars of soap in it, and that's how it is in life, is that we have freedom as Americans, as people who live in the West, but freedom we associate with freedom of choice. So we feel free when we got a lot of things to choose. And so we're obsessed with the right to choose. For us, that's freedom. And so if you look at politics, all the arguments that happen are about freedom to choose things. And so we equate freedom with choice. And so I am free if I can choose things. If I have 100 different bars of soap, then I live in a free country. Like does that make sense? We have freedom equals choice in American life. Okay, we got that established. Christianity has a different definition of freedom. Does this make sense? For Christians, freedom does not just equal choice, because that's pretty shallow. Because there's a lot of bad bars of soap out there. I can tell you firsthand. I bought 4 of them, and 1 worked. All choice is not equal choice, because you can choose bad things, or you can choose things that don't serve you. So what is freedom for Christians? Freedom is not simply freedom of choice. Freedom to a Christian is freedom to become. That's a different thing. Does that make sense? Because there's a lot of areas in the world where you cannot become who God is calling you to be. Maybe there's a dictator and they don't like Christianity. And so they've made it illegal to be a Christian. This is how it was in the first century. For the first 300 years of Christianity, Christianity was an illegal religion in Rome. They didn't have big churches until around 325. Why? Because Christians couldn't buy property because it was illegal. And so Rome, they were a polytheistic society, and they considered the emperor to be God. So when Christians come along and they say, no, the true God is Jesus, Rome didn't love that. And so they persecuted Christians, and we've heard this, right? And so for Christians, when we say freedom, we believe in freedom is not simply choice. That's the shallow definition. Hey, I got a lot of choices, I'm free. Well, you can have a lot of choices and be miserable. You can got a lot of choices and be suffering. You got a lot of choices, your family's suffering. You can have a lot of choices, you can be unfulfilled. Right? So that's not freedom. So when we say Jesus came to give you freedom, we're not just saying he didn't give you access to Target. What he gave you is the freedom to become who you were made to be. That's a different vision of freedom, and we struggle with this as Americans because we think Jesus is all loving and we're free. And what we do is we apply a consumeristic, modern definition of freedom, that Jesus came to give us choices. No. Jesus came to free you up so that you might become the person he made you to be. And so I love this. This is Romans 8, 1 through 2, point 2. If you get anything in this message, you can get this point. I promise it will shift the whole way you think about Jesus being your liberator. Because we believe that. God is your liberator. He has come to bring you freedom. Well, what does that mean? Romans 8, 1, 2. So therefore, there is no condemnation for those in the Messiah, Jesus. Why not? Because the law of the Spirit of life in the Messiah, Jesus has released you from the law of sin and death. And so there's a couple things I want to say. The first is, so there is no condemnation. So Jesus does not come to criticize, to put down, or to take away. And so I think that's something we struggle with as a Christian church, is that I feel like as a body of Christ, not all of us, but there are some Christians that love to be the takeaway people. They like to criticize, shame, and put down. And so what that really is, that's getting people to change by force. That's what that is. That's like tyranny language, right? So you come to a person and say, hey, you don't play by my rules. I'm going to put pressure on you. I'm going to shame you. That's a way to get people to change by coercing them through force, right? But Christianity doesn't do that. Jesus comes, he's the king, but he comes to serve. So he doesn't get anybody to do anything by force. He doesn't dominate you. What he does is he comes to give you freedom so that you could become. And then he does it with you. That's why it's a free gift of grace. It's a free invitation. There's no condemnation. Yes, you're a broken person. Welcome to earth. So Jesus does not come to condemn, to put you down, to shame you, to force you. The opposite true. He comes to liberate you from what? From sin and death. I was talking to a young person the other day, and this was a couple weeks, maybe a month ago. I was telling Brad about this. Is that they told me, they said, I don't believe in sin, which I love having theological and philosophical debates. If you ever want to have a little fun, let's go have lunch. I love it. I love a good skeptic. Come on. Let's talk about it. Let's get into the weeds, man. As Christians, we shouldn't be scared. We should talk about this stuff, right? We're always freaked out. People got questions. No, let's talk about it. So they were like, I don't believe in sin. I go, I hear you. And so we discussed it in a little bit more. And so what they really meant was, I don't believe in condemnation. Because that's what most people mean when they say that I don't believe there's sin in the world, or I don't believe. Well, basically what they're saying is that I don't like that we're telling people what to do and making people feel bad and shaming them. Yeah. And so I hear you. I totally get that. And so Romans 8:1 says, no condemnation. We're not in the shaming business. I said, but I just have a couple questions. Do you believe that someone can make choices that would make them suffer? They go, yeah. I go, do you believe that someone could miss their moment, or maybe spend 10 years in the wrong direction? Yeah. I go, do you believe that broken people hurt each other? Yeah. I go, so Christians have a word for that. That's sin. That's what it is. So when we say sin, that's not a shame word. That's a descriptive word. So sin just means, as a Christian, when we say that we live in a world of sin, what we're saying is that we live in a world that is not achieving its potential. You got people living in darkness. You got people living in confusion. You got people who are living below what they could be. You got people who are insecure because somebody put them down. You got people that are hurt, who are hurting other people. You got people who don't know who they really are, making decisions that are taking them down a path that they're going to wake up at 30, at 40, and 50 and say, how did I get here? That's life. And so when we say that God comes and he is our freedom, and he frees us from the power of sin, and he frees us from the power of death, what we're saying is that God frees us up. He comes to us wanting to prosper us, wanting to give us life, wanting to give us security, wanting to give us to see our lives being blessed. And so when we say that we live in freedom, we are free from shame. You are free from the insecurity you grew up with because you know who Jesus is. You are free from discounting yourself because you did that for a lot of years, and then you met Jesus, and then he showed you what you were worth. He showed you that he loved you. He showed you who you were. He showed you what you were capable in. He frees you up from suffering long term. Maybe there's decisions in your life that you've made that you picked up from your parents, generational behaviors. And so you come into Christianity, and then Paul says that we are new human beings. And we take off our old clothes of falsehood. We take off of the old things that held us back. All the times we felt insecure and we might, all the times we spoke bad about somebody, that gossiping, we take off the old behaviors that made us less than who we really are. And we put on the new behaviors, which is grace and wisdom and power and mercy and love and justice. And we put on these new things. And when we do that, we begin to become who God has made us to be. And so when we say that we believe that God gives us freedom, what we are saying is, I believe so powerfully, is that he is releasing us, or we have been redeemed. Yeah. Redeemed is an amazing word because redeem means purchase back. And so maybe anxiety has had you for 10, 15, 20 years. So that would be darkness or confusion. Maybe you've been stuck in a discounted position for 10 years. So when you said that to Jesus and he sets you free, what he does is he redeems you. So he is purchasing you back from the forces of depression. He is purchasing you back from that voice that you had since you were a kid telling you you don't deserve it. He is purchasing you back from that voice you have in your 20s that says, what if I don't make it? What if I don't make adulthood? I think a lot of young people struggle with that. They are growing in life, and then life hits them, and then they're shocked that they got hit because that was the first time they got hit, and then they got to build a life and become strong, and they don't know. And so when they come to Jesus, Jesus is your freedom. So what he does is he frees you from sin and the effects of sin. So he redeems you. He is purchasing you back from the forces that seek to destroy you. And so that's what it means to have freedom in God. Point number 3, for those of you note takers. We are called to live freely. This is Galatians 5:1. And then the worship team, if you could come up. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm. Someone say, stand firm. Then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. I love this, that God freed you so that you might live freely. Freedom to live what you were made for, to live your purpose, to prosper, to live the life of heaven, to see the peace of heaven be the peace in your family, to see the love of heaven be the love that you have for yourself and then comes out of you, to see the wisdom of heaven be the knowledge that is the operating procedure for your family. And so good things come out of your family. Well, why? Because you've been freed from sin so that you can live in the good. And this is the final point, is that we are free to do. Why does God free us? Ephesians 2:8, if you want to. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. The second step in your journey of faith is purpose. And we're going to explore this next week, because this is going to be a journey that we're going to go on. But the first step, freedom, you were free for a reason. This is the beautiful thing about God. He doesn't just free you and then leave you. He frees you so that he can move in to your life. Does that make sense? He doesn't just save. I want to talk to all the mothers and fathers out there. Jesus did not reveal himself to you just so you could give your life to God on a Sunday. Jesus revealed himself to you because he showed you a door. But he wants to walk through that door into your family. He wants to fill your family with his goodness. And so he didn't just free you once. He's going to free you every single day of your life. That's what righteousness is. We are righteous, right standing to be in connection to God. We are righteous not by what we do, but by his divine gift. So God sees you, he embraces you, he loves you, and he says, I free you. I free you. I just lift, and it's free. It's a free gift. I'm just going to gift you prosperity, hope, and a future. Why? Because you are worth it, and I'm doing it for a purpose. I'm going to turn your family around for a purpose. I'm going to fill this church for a purpose. I'm going to see your children's children prosper for a purpose. Let's all stand real quick. Who got blessed today? I'm done teaching. Yeah. So before we sing a song, I just want to lead us in this prayer. I feel like there might be folks in this room who came today and said, Pastor Stefan, I want this freedom. Maybe you're a person who has been a Christian and you're saying, I want to get a deeper connection to God. I want to know this freedom better. Maybe you've been attending this church and you're saying, Pastor Stefan, I want to live a life of freedom. I want to call the Congregation.Family my home church. Or maybe you're looking at me and saying, I was brought by somebody. I just want to give my life to Jesus. I want to experience this freedom for myself. I want to live free. If that is you, join me in this prayer. Jesus, thank you for giving me life. Father, thank you for sending your son to change my life. Jesus, be Jesus in my life in a new and special way. Today, I say yes to your invitation to live freely. And everybody said, amen. Let's give a clap for everybody who prayed that prayer this morning. Yeah. And before we leave, I'm going to have my mom close and say a few words. But as she comes up, let's take 1 minute and let's just worship God and thank him for his freedom that he gives us.